Hello, all my paranormal misfits, and welcome to the Paranormal Misfit podcast. I am your host, Chrissy, and I'm here to talk about all things paranormal and spooky. From experience that I or someone else has had, to the shows, movies, and books, to lores and legends, and to the places known for the paranormal. I'm going to talk about all of it. I myself am a believer with a healthy set of skepticism. You'll hear my thoughts and feelings about different topics revolving around the paranormal, so cozy up with your favorite beverage of choice and listen along. Good evening, all my ghouls. Tonight's episode is about the St. Augustine Lighthouse. So the way these episodes will work is that I will introduce the topic of the evening, and then I'll give some history, some background, if it's paranormal, any cases or any investigations that were done, and then give any thoughts or feedback I may have myself on it. So with that, tonight is about the St. Augustine Lighthouse. Some background on myself. My name is Chrissy. I'm a Florida native. I'm a lover of all things spooky and paranormal. While I haven't personally done like paranormal and investigations like you see on TV, I have went on multiple ghost tours, which I absolutely love. I'm a mom of 3, and I'm happily married to my husband, who I do drag along to each and every ghost tour I find. And then I also make him watch all sorts of different paranormal shows, scary movies, TV shows that I love that revolve around the paranormal, the spooky, the occult. So yeah. I like to call myself a believer with a healthy set of skepticism. While I do believe in ghosts, I do like to try and debunk before diving headfirst into the it's haunted, it's an alien, blah, blah, blah kind of thing. So now, with that being said, on to our topic of the night. So tonight's topic is about, once again, the St. Augustine Lighthouse. If you're not familiar with St. Augustine and the St. Augustine Lighthouse, St. Augustine is considered one of the oldest and most haunted cities in America. It is a funky city to check out, so fun to walk around in. And if you're a paranormal enthusiast like myself, there are plenty of ghost tours you can go on. So over the course of 10 years with my husband, we've done countless ghost tours in various locations around St. Augustine. The lighthouse has been one of them. And in the TV show Ghost Hunters, that you can check out, I think on Discovery Plus, they've investigated this place twice. So yeah, it is the 8th tallest lighthouse in the United States. A little history on it. In 1589 was the first ever documentation of the wooden watchtower at the end of Anastasia Island. The watchtowers were erected by the Spanish crown during the building of the Castillo de San Marcos to keep enemy ships from taking Anastasia Island. You had one watchtower at the north end of the island, which eventually becomes the St. Augustine Lighthouse, and then you have the one at the south end that becomes Fort Matanzas National Monument. By 1737, the Spanish replaced the earlier construction with a new 30-foot watchtower made of coquina, which is a shell rock, and wood. During this time period, obviously, there's a lot of wars between Great Britain and Spain. One of the big incidences were there was a Spanish captain named Juan de Leon Fandino reportedly cut off the left ear of Captain Robert Jenkins after accusations of smuggling. Years later, the British press whipped up a frenzy surrounding the incident when Great Britain attempted to overtake the Caribbean trade. 1739 Spanish Governor Manuel de Montillano, God, I think I butchered his name, created a community for escaped slaves and free blacks fleeing the English territories. Fort Moses attracted runaway slaves to Florida. Many traveled local waterways across the border. Running to freedom, of course, provoked the anger of the Spanish planters, and British forces occupied Moses during the General James Oglethorpe's 1740 siege of St. Augustine, destroying the fort. However, it would be rebuilt in 1752. And again, free people lived there until the British occupation of East Florida in 1763. So this fort was the first free African American community within the United States. It would soon become evident that the first St. Augustine Lighthouse Tower was doomed to fall into the ocean. So the U.S. Congress appropriated, did I say that right? $100K in funding for a new lighthouse during the Florida Reconstruction period. The U.S. Lighthouse Service began the construction of the new 165-foot tower in 1871 and did not finish until 1874. From St. Augustine, workers from St. Augustine included African American residents. Temporary buildings they had temporary buildings to house both the people and the horses while they were constructing at the site, and then these buildings were torn down as to not change the appearance of the light station. In 1874, lighthouse keeper William R. Russell lit the oil lamp inside of the new first order Fresnel lenses for the first time. He most likely walked the tower from his residence at the old St. Augustine light station, upon which the sea was rapidly encroaching. The lens itself is 9 feet tall, and Russell would have had to climb inside to light the lamps. With these new lenses, they could be seen from 19 to 24 nautical miles, depending on the atmospheric pressure, conditions, not pressure. Let's see. In 1883, a river rail between Jacksonville, Florida, St. Augustine, Florida, and Halifax made arrival easier. In the winter of 1884, a wealthy visitor named Henry Flagler, a partner with John D. Rockefeller in Standard Oil, came to St. Augustine and decided to transform it. Flagler developed St. Augustine into a major resort town for the wealthy patrons from northern climates, calling Florida a paradise, basically. He provided a means for tourists to arrive at and check into his new hotel safely, investing in both rail lines and steamships. St. Augustine quickly flourished with increased tourism. Flagler extended his railroads and hotels south into Florida's developing Palm Beach area and eventually building a railroad into Key West, a move that some called Flagler's folly. In the late 1800s, Victorian tourists from Henry Flagler's grand hotels visited the island by horse-drawn cart or by rowboat for day excursions. Guests occasionally had tea on the large lighthouse rubble at low tide. African Americans built fires for oyster roast and helped row the tourists to the island and back, making extra money on which to survive. The coastal lookout building was constructed at St. Augustine Light Station in the late 1941 and early 1942 after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. However, life had not changed dramatically on the East Coast. Americans still felt a sense of separation of the war. The sinking of the SS Gulf America off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida in April 1942 did change that feeling. Candle power in the lighthouse was reduced. Blackout curtains were required in every home, and cars had to drive without headlights. The current lighthouse is, as of right now, 145 years old. This is from October 2019, so it's now 148. It is one part of an aid to navigation system here supporting military defenses, travel, trade, fishing, boating, boat building and pleasure boating since the 16th century. Oh my goodness, I cannot talk. All right, so on to the hauntings. So is it haunted? It might be. Who knows? All right, so stories of hauntings. On July 10th of 1873, the three Pitty sisters, Mary, who was 15, Eliza, who was 13, and Carrie, who was 4, along with an unknown African American girl who was 10. The Pitty sisters, whose father, oh, oh my goodness. Okay, so starting over. On July 10th, 1873, the three Pitty sisters, Mary, Eliza, and Carrie, along with an unknown African American girl whose father may have worked on the site, were riding in the cart used to push rock and rubble and stuff everywhere. The wooden board that usually stops the cart from going into the water was not in place that day, and the cart was carrying the girls flipped into the water, trapping the girls underneath. A Mr. Dan Sessions, a young African American worker, witnessed the tragic event and raced to the water. Now, the Pithy sisters, their dad was in charge of the construction of the lighthouse, which I believe I forgot to mention. I'm so sorry. But yeah, so Mr. Dan Sessions was a young African American worker, witnessed the tragic event, and raced to the water. When he reached the cart using all of his strength, he lifted it from atop the girls. By this time, 3 of the 4 girls had drowned. The only survivor was the youngest, Carrie. In the days following the accident, the construction site as well as the town shut down for the funeral of the girls. Following the funeral, the Pitty family returned to Maine to lay their daughters to rest in their hometown. Staff researchers have not yet been able to find the resting place of the young African American girl. In the 145 years since the accident, strange occurrences have been repeatedly attributed to the spirits of the girls. Oh my god. You can read some of them on the websites that I have found, and you for yourself can decide if they are fact or fiction. Grown children of the lighthouse keepers have told stories that the home was a terrific place for Halloween parties and for telling ghost stories. Another story involves a relief lighthouse keeper living in the home in the 1950s who reported hearing footsteps upstairs. He went up to investigate, but no one was there. The head keeper at the time was James Pippin. Ooh. He served from 1953 to 1955 and was the last keeper to live at the light station. Pippin initially lived in the keeper's house, as did all the previous keepers had done, but he moved into the much smaller 1941 Coastal Lookout building, swearing that the big house was haunted and he wouldn't stay in it another night. In 1955, the lighthouse lamp was fully automated, and the United States Coast Guard replaced the light keepers with a position called the lamp lighter. The local lamplighter had all the duties of a light keeper but did not live on site. As a result, the keeper's house was rented from time to time. A local man who crafted leather goods rented the property during the 1960s. And he tells of stories waking up one night with a small girl standing by his bed. As soon as he blinked his eyes, she disappeared. In 1970, after staying empty for many years, the keeper's house burned under mysterious circumstances, gutting the home and leaving only the coquina basement and a few charred timbers. St. Johns County purchased the shell of the building, and with that, the intention of demolishing it for safety reasons. However, 16 women in an all-volunteer junior service league of St. Augustine stepped in, raising $1.2 million over the next 15 years to restore and renovate the lightkeeper's house. Renovate the keeper's house, the light tower, and the original lenses. This is a feat that was never accomplished, though. The group added the building to the National Register of Historic Places with the help of Karen Harvey, a local historian, writer, and longtime lighthouse advocate. During the renovation, both construction workers and volunteers from JSL reported numerous unexplained incidences in the home. The basement was particularly active for ghostly encounters, being the only part of the home that had not been completely burned. Perhaps the children liked to play here? Today, you can still feel a spooky presence there. While the children are by no means the only tragedy that occurred in the home, the girls are some of the most active spirits. Psychics contact staffers frequently, and recently one told those who volunteer at the lighthouse that the young African American girl's name was Ellie or Eleanor. We continue to our we continue our archival research. This is off the website. They continue their archival research and hope to find historical evidence to one day confirm this information. As playful spirits, the girls enjoy hide and seek, sometimes including unsuspecting people. One night, in the dark lighthouse tower, a lone staff member was closing up for the night. He heard giggling at the top of the tower. Thinking that he had left someone on the top of the tower, oh my gosh. He returned to the top to find it empty. As he began to head back down the tower, he heard the same giggles below him this time. Descending to the bottom, he once again found no one was there. Was it just the wind, or was he in the midst of playing hide and seek? Another evening, a female guest on the Dark Moon tour, which is offered by the lighthouse, was standing was standing on the. That was my 3-year-old in the background. Okay, so back to the spirits that are supposedly around the St. Augustine Lighthouse. So on another tour, a guide found a group of young women in the basement of the keeper's home. One of the young women rented the EMF detector to measure the electrical activity caused by the spirits. The young woman holding the meter asked the girls if they wanted to play hide and seek. The meter spiked. The woman wandered the basement searching for the hiding girls, finally finding meter activity under the spiral staircase leading to the main floor. Excitedly, she said she found them and asked if they wanted to play again. Like before, the meter spiked. Once again, the young woman searched the basement for the girls and after several minutes found electrical energy near the children's play table. Around that time, another set of guests came into the basement and reportedly the energy disappeared. The girls sometimes appear to people in fully formed apparitions. Several years ago during the day, a guest was exploring the hammock trails and came upon a young girl in a Victorian outfit sitting on a bench reading a book. As she began to ask the girl a question, a group came up from the opposite direction. Distracted by the group, the woman looked away, but only for a moment, and then turned back to find the little girl on the bench was gone. In a similar instance, a woman on a ghost tour approached another woman to compliment her daughter's behavior on the tour. Confused, the woman said she had no daughter. The woman then told her that a little girl had been standing by her side most of the evening, though there were no children on the tour that evening. So those are just a few of the stories. I know when we were on our ghost tour, and I believe the last place on the stop, because it was one of those, we went into different haunted locations around St. Augustine, like the old antique shop. There was an apartment above I think it was a nightclub or a bar. And then the lighthouse, that we didn't go into the lighthouse. I believe it was closed at the time because they were renovating, but out on the grounds where there's like a kid area to play, like swings, slides, and stuff, there are also stories that these swings will move, on their own, or someone will see like an apparition of a little girl playing on the swing set or going down the slide. So yeah, you get a lot of those. For this reason, and all of the other reasons, or all of the other instances I had shared earlier, this is the reason why famed paranormal investigator and the lead man of Ghost Hunters called the lighthouse the Mona Lisa of paranormal sites. Other instances, visitors to the lighthouse describe catching flashes of a young girl dressed in old era clothing, gazing out from the lighthouse door, or standing by the upstairs window. The ghost of this young lady is rather pleasant and rarely interacts with visitors. The same can't be said of the less wholesome entities. So, on to the scarier stories. There's a terrifying specter that haunts the lighthouse named the Man in Blue. So when he appears, he makes life a living hell for the workers. One lighthouse keeper refused to go back to work because the Man in Blue harassed him the whole night, chasing him up and down the 219 stairs of the lighthouse. And it is a spiral metal staircase, and those are some steep stairs. So eventually, the lighthouse duty had to be handed over to the Coast Guard because of the wrath of the Man in Blue. Many think the Man in Blue is a wandering spirit of the lighthouse keeper Joseph Andrew. Andrew plummeted to his death while painting the original tower in 1859. So with his, I believe it's on the fourth story, they have a metal bucket, and it was an awfully heavy metal bucket. And they kind of show you like what the lighthouse keepers would have to carry all the way up the staircase and all the way back down. So yeah. Others, meanwhile, maintain that the poltergeist is that of another lighthouse keeper. This man was brokenhearted by his solitude, allegedly hung himself in the tower, and was only discovered the next night when the lighthouse failed to illuminate the coast. Visitors and Visitors and staff describe the overwhelming smell of cigar smoke on the landing of the tower, despite the fact that smoking has been prohibited on the grounds. Whew. At night, the current keeper constantly says he can hear boots coming up and down the stairs, but when he turns around, there's no one there. Inside the lighthouse and around the property, many are often spooked by these strange and eerie events that they just cannot explain. Staff members say that they can lock a door at the very top of the tower, which is super high up, and each night before leaving, and yet the door is often open in the morning when they arrive for work. Lighthouse staff also report that chairs have been moved or overturned and that various items in the gift shop were either missing or moved, only to reappear later. Music boxes themselves have been known to turn on. Some say while touring the light keepers' quarters, they feel cold, and that the figure of a tall man has appeared before them and then disappeared. I'm going to use the example of the very first investigation. So when you go on Discovery Plus, you go to obviously the paranormal and whatever else it's called genre, and in the class it's called Ghost Hunters Classic TV show. The crew investigated the lighthouse. Some of the experience they had were conversations on levels above them in the lighthouse, in which they would follow up the stairs, but could never find where the conversation was coming from. All four men witnessed a shadowy figure looking down at them over the rail and then moving back. There's also an EVP in which they show later on in the episode that says, "Help me," in the lighthouse. They did debunk, however, the bucket being picked up and dropped. So that was one of the paranormal experiences that happened in the lighthouse. Come to find out, where this bucket's located on the landing, that there's also a window, and it was a very heavy window, that if this window is closed by the wind, it would make the same exact sound as the bucket being dropped. For me, I think the lighthouse is super fun to visit. I love listening to the stories. As I said, I'm a believer with a healthy respect of skepticism, basically. I didn't catch anything. I didn't have anything, like when I was taking pictures, I didn't really feel much. But we were also outside, and it was, well, if you've ever been to Florida, during October, it's quite warm, even at night. I think it's fun. I'm not saying these experiences haven't happened. And people get some good evidence out there. People have experiences, and I wholeheartedly believe in, going out and seeing it for yourself. Now, maybe the next time I go on a ghost tour that's out there, I might actually, come across something. And if I do, I'll make sure and share it on my Instagram. But other than that, yeah, that concludes the St. Augustine Lighthouse. Well, that concludes this episode of the Paranormal Misfits. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest, make sure you subscribe to this podcast on whichever platform you're listening to on. And give me a follow on Instagram at Paranormal Misfit. If you have your own spooky paranormal story you'd like to share or want to hear about a particular lore, place, or whatnot, please feel free to drop me a DM in Instagram. And on that note, I will catch you all later at the next episode, my ghouls.